thank you all for coming. So I'm going to read from the book in a few minutes, but first I thought I would answer a couple of questions that came up repeatedly while I was writing the book. I'd be walking down the street and run into a friend I hadn't seen in a long time, and they would ask, "So Allison, what are you working on these days?" And I would explain that it's a story about a rare book thief and the man who spent 3 years tracking him down. Well, this would almost always elicit the same responses. The first was, "Oh, so it's a novel you're working on." And I would explain, no, this is nonfiction. And the second was, "What era does it take place in?" And I would explain, this is a modern story. So after hearing these questions over and over again, and answering them the same way over and over again, I thought I really ought to be more precise when I'm describing this project. So from then on, when I would run into an old friend and they would say, "So Allison, what are you working on?" I would explain that it's a nonfiction story about a modern day rare book thief and the man who spent 3 years tracking him down. Well, this would elicit a couple of responses. The first was, "Oh, so it's a novel you're working on?" And the second was, "What era does it take place in?" So I'm here just to clarify, it is a true story, and it took place over the last few years. I first met John Gilkey, the man who loved books too much, when he was serving a 3-year sentence for stealing books. He was first sent to San Quentin, and then when I met him at the end of the sentence, it was in Tracy, California. And we continued to meet over the next 3 years, both in prison and out, and back in and back out several times as he was repeatedly caught for stealing books. So I'm reading tonight from a passage that describes one of the meetings that we had on the outside. A couple of months after Gilkey's 2005 release from prison, I met him in front of 49 Geary Street, a building that houses several art galleries and rare bookstores in San Francisco. It was a September morning, and he wore a bright white sweatshirt, pleated khakis, his beige leather sneakers, and a PGA baseball cap. He held a folder, on top of which lay a handwritten numbered list, his to-do list for the day. "So, how do you want to do this?" he asked. The week before, he had agreed to let me tag along with him on one of his scouting trips to learn how he selects books. I had suggested going to Goodwill, a frequent haunt of his now that he was persona non grata in most San Francisco rare bookshops. Gilkey, though, wanted to take me to Brick Row, from which he had stolen the mayor of Casterbridge. I tried to mask my disbelief and hoped he would think of another place. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Wouldn't Goodwill work?" Probably sensing my unease, he hesitated. "Maybe they'll recognize me," he said, but reconsidered. "On second thought, it won't be a problem." At home, I emailed Ken Sanders. This was a rare book dealer in Salt Lake City, the man who spent 3 years tracking him down, for his opinion. Would the owner of Brick Row, John Crichton, whom I had not yet met, be upset or angry that I'd knowingly accompanied a rare book thief into his store? I didn't relish dealing with the wrath of one of Gilkey's victims, however peripherally. "Crichton's a good guy," Sanders assured me, and gave me the impression that, as Gilkey had said, it wouldn't be a problem. I was still wary, but too curious to walk away from an opportunity to see Gilkey in his element. What sort of person returns to the scene of his crime? So far, I had only come to know Gilkey only through our private conversations. I still had no idea how he behaved out in the world, especially his idealized rare book world. He shared many characteristics of other collectors, but his thieving set him apart in ways that still confounded me. Was he amoral or mentally ill? How are such lines drawn anyway? Accompanying Gilkey to Brick Row was an irresistible chance to be an eyewitness. Also, I had heard that the shop was well regarded among rare book collectors, and I wanted to see it firsthand. Standing on the sidewalk in front of Brick Row, Gilkey said he would show me what he typically looks for and how he goes about it. He did not appear to be apprehensive. I, on the other hand, was all nerves. I had no idea what Crichton might do when we walked in. This, at the very least, was going to be awkward. We took the elevator to the second floor and passed the rare bookshop of John Windle, who had been helpful months earlier when I consulted him about the 17th century German botanical text, the book that had captured my curiosity and led me to Gilkey and Sanders. I was sure Wendell would recognize me, and I feared also Gilkey as we passed his shop. So I turned and looked the other way so that I wouldn't have to explain myself. These are small, quiet shops, places where 1 customer is the norm, 2 is busy, and 3 feels bustling. Gilkey and I arrived at the door to Brick Row almost immediately. We walked in and faced 2 men, John Crichton, the owner, standing near the rear, and an employee sitting at a desk near the entrance. Did they recognize Gilkey? Would they call the police? Inside Brick Row, natural light streamed through the windows, illuminating books sitting in cases along every wall and under windows and on a graceful arc of shelves that ran through the middle of the shop. It was a quiet refuge from the city streets below. And if you ignore the computer and phone on Crichton's heavy oak desk, it could be a 19th century bookshop. Thousands of majestic, leather-bound books, many with gold lettering, caught the light as I walked by. Given Gilkey's Victorian library fantasies, I could see why he favored this shop, why he chose to bring me there. A filmmaker would do well to use it as a set for a gentleman's fine library. Gilkey had described it to me like this: more classier feel than some of the other bookstores that just rack them up in average bookcases. Crichton spoke from behind his desk. "May I help you?" His question seemed to ask much more. He was looking hard at Gilkey. "I'm not here to buy anything," Gilkey said congenially. "Just to look around if that's okay. We're just here to look." No answer. Crichton stood facing us. He was in his 50s with white hair, a ruddy complexion, and clear blue eyes. He had an assured air and seemed to be the kind of person who rarely had the wool pulled over his eyes. Gilkey referred to his list of the modern library's 100 best novels and explained to me how he often looks for books on it. He pointed to the name Nathaniel Hawthorne. "Do you have any Hawthorne?" Gilkey asked Crichton. Crichton answered curtly, "No." "I know he has one," Gilkey whispered to me. As we inched down Brick Row's bookshelves, Gilkey pointed to another book on his list. "Kurt Vonnegut," he said. "I'd like something from him too. And D.H. Lawrence, he's also good." Crichton looked stunned and turned his back to us, then turned around again to face Gilkey. A few seconds later, while Gilkey was explaining to me which books he might like to look for, Crichton asked, "What's your name?" "John." John, as though Crichton would be satisfied with a first name. I looked down at my notes while my heartbeat threatened to drown out everything around me. "John what?" "Gilkey." I still can't believe he gave his real name. Crichton waited a moment, glanced down at his desk, then looked up. He didn't take his eyes off us as Gilkey pointed to various books and whispered, as one does in a library or museum, informing me about additional authors he was interested in. Vladimir Nabokov, Willa Cather. He commented that he stays away from Bibles. Crichton stared a moment, and then he asked me, "And who are you?" I'll stop there. Thanks.